to be back with you today and just talking about something that is so meaningful and has impacted me significantly in my life, and that is people pleasing. High achievement and people pleasing often go hand in hand. And that's because there is a drive towards people being productive, doing what you're told, trying to climb the corporate ladder, or just trying to be the best version of yourself in an achievement role. And a lot of times there's a pressure to conform and to do things that other people want you to do. And if you already have people pleasing tendencies, it can be a perfect storm of feeling like the pressure to constantly get approval of others, or constantly be that go-to person for somebody and not be able to really say no to anyone. And also having those beliefs that this is something that you need to do in order to do that. So I want to share with you today just some things that have helped me really anchor into myself and not continue on this path of being a people pleaser, and really just standing in my own power and living more authentically. And so I want to talk about people pleasing because there can be a big misconception about what people pleasing is. And really, people pleasing is not just about making others happy. It's about us not feeling shame and trying to avoid the shame of having to cause maybe a disagreement with somebody or having to say no to someone. So, when we talk about people pleasing, it's really an internal battle. It's something that's deep within us, that we have these messages and beliefs that we have to say yes to others. We have to always put others before ourselves. And there's almost a nobility about it, where we feel like we're a good person if we constantly put everyone in front of us. And so we may have grown up with these messages and may have acquired them from childhood, where it was praised for being someone who was selfless, always putting others before themselves, always looking out for everyone. And while there are great qualities to that, there's also a balance we need to navigate. And that is not doing it to the point where we are self sacrificing, where we are constantly putting ourselves on the back burner and ignoring and suppressing our needs. And so that's why it's so important to acknowledge this and recognize, is this something that you do? Is this something that you see as a theme in your life? So I think it's really important to understand, what does it look like on a daily basis? So if you are a people pleaser, you're someone who seeks out approval. You want others to approve of you and maybe compliment you and acknowledge what you're doing for them. You want that approval. In some cases, you may feel like you even need that approval. There's also this sacrificing and suppressing element to it, that others' needs are more important than your own. This can look like putting projects before your own health. It can look like trying to meet the deadline and not necessarily being present for your kids because that deadline is there. It can look like being on your phone and responding to emails, even though your eyes are so strained, you're exhausted, you just want to conk out, you've been working all day and now you've taken it home, but you feel that need to do everything for something outside of yourself. It can be just not even getting water when you're thirsty, something as simple as that, ignoring some basic needs. You may feel thirst and just say, I'll push it to the side, this is more important. It can be pushing off bathroom breaks. Maybe you have to use the bathroom, but you're like, this is, I'll take care of that later. I just need to do this. And so it can be as simple as the basic needs, or as complex as just literally putting everything and everyone in front of you. It's also about internalizing judgment. So when you are a people pleaser, you tend to take others' judgments and make it about yourself, and as if their judgments are the honest truth about yourself. So there can be a very blurred line between knowing who you actually are and what others judge you for or say about you. And so when you internalize these, you again are seeking out that approval of someone. So it can be even more complex when you start to internalize those messages. You may tend to apologize a lot. Are you someone who's always saying sorry, even if you didn't even do anything? You're just saying sorry. Are you the person that says sorry at the grocery store, even though you didn't do anything, or just to the waitress, or you're constantly saying sorry to people, even though you didn't actually do anything that warranted a sorry? And again, there's a big difference between you doing something that requires a sorry, or not doing something that doesn't require a sorry. So are you just apologizing freely and often for unnecessary reasons? Are you staying silent? This is a big one because as a people pleaser, you often will try to avoid conflict. You will want to keep things smooth, not ruffle any feathers, and even if that means not speaking your truth. So, this is one that I have dealt with much in my life, in that I would just suppress what I needed to say or not speak my truth because I didn't want anyone getting into a riff. I didn't want the confrontation. It was just easier for me to stay silent than to actually say something and then things erupt. But I can tell you it costs you a lot when you do that. And that's something that I've had to actively work on, is that I am worthy of speaking my truth. But when you're a people pleaser, you can sometimes feel like it's harder to deal with the conflict and confrontation than it is just to keep silent and not say what you want to actually say. A big one, again, something I have struggled with for years, is setting boundaries. And so boundaries are not about knocking people out of your life. It's about you preserving your own peace and well-being. It's about you maintaining an elevation of your energy. So if you're someone who works on elevating your energy and feeling like you're in a good space mentally and emotionally, and you have somebody who's in your life that is maybe toxic, or someone who's just pulling you down constantly, being a people pleaser can be really tough to set those boundaries and to make them really non-negotiable, that this is so important to you to maintain your energy that it's not worth having that person in your life that's constantly taking you down. It can be really, really uncomfortable to set those. And when you're a people pleaser, you are always thinking about, what is the other person going to think? What will they be thinking if I do this? I don't want them to not like me. Because again, there's another part of that, that you want that approval. So you want people to approve of you, and setting boundaries can feel like you're really conflicted in that. So these are some of those telltale signs that if you're a people pleaser, these are some of those things that you may struggle with. And again, like I was saying, this is very personal to me because I have struggled with many of these things throughout my life. And there is a cost to this. And this is what I didn't realize throughout the course of my life when I was actually doing this. And what the cost is mental, physical, and emotional, and even spiritual too. It costs you significantly. And so when you suppress or ignore your needs, or are always looking outside yourself to make sure everyone else is okay, and always leaving yourself on the back burner, the cost is increased stress. Your system literally senses that you are ignoring or suppressing yourself, or not honoring the needs that it has. And this comes out physically in feeling tension throughout your body. It can feel like you're breathing shallow, or that your heart is pounding. It can feel like tension headaches. It can feel like just pain in your body. So there's a lot of ways that this can show up when you're constantly just suppressing or ignoring your own needs. Mentally, it can come through as being ruminating on negativity. So constantly thinking about things and, what would they say? What would happen if I did this? Oh my gosh, I don't want them to be mad at me, or like, I just want to make sure that everything's okay. I don't want that to blow up if I don't do this. It can come out in a lot of ways where we get into this cycle of constantly worrying and thinking about the worst case scenario, or just thinking negatively about what just happened and, what did I do wrong? Could I have done it differently? And constantly putting the blame on ourselves. And it comes out emotionally. So, emotionally, when you're constantly looking outside yourself for others' approval, and you're trying to make sure everybody is okay and make sure everyone is happy, that creates a lack of trust within yourself. So, you're not listening to your own inner voice of like, what do you need in this moment? Because you're always looking out for what everyone else needs. So, when you quiet that voice and you don't tune into yourself, you start to lose that trust within yourself. And this creates a cycle of feeling guilty. So, never in any case can you constantly make everybody happy. It's just completely impossible. So, you can feel a big sense of guilt and shame when you're trying to make everyone happy. You're putting all this effort into doing the right thing, and it just never feels like it's enough. So, you can carry a lot of guilt and shame in that. There can also be fear in that you worry about what someone's going to do if you don't honor their needs or constantly look after them. There can be fear around your job, What if I don't do it exactly the way the boss wants me to? What if I say no? Oh my gosh, I could lose my job. There's a lot of fear that's involved in that. There can also be grief in this. So when you start to stand in your own power, when you start to stand in your authenticity, it's not smooth sailing. Often it's the opposite. When you start to listen to yourself, honor your own needs, what can happen is that relationships change because everyone is used to you showing up, bending until you break, and doing what they expect you to do. So the minute you start to change the way you show up, it forces them to have to change themselves. And a lot of times that can create a rift in people. And so there can be some grief that you experience in this because of the loss of maybe some relationships that were truly just founded on a rocky foundation of you making them happy, but not making yourself happy. So it's so important to recognize that there are so many costs when you are a people pleaser and you're constantly looking outside yourself. And this is something that maybe may go unnoticed and under the radar for a long time because you're used to doing things the way that you've done. You're used to keeping things smooth. You're used to being the go-to person. You're used to being that person that says yes to everything, even though deep down in your heart, you want to say no. And so this is so important to recognize, like, are you doing this in your life? Is this resonating with you? Is there something that I've said that you are like, oh, that's me. That is me. And it's okay if it's you for right now. The thing is that what you don't want to do is be like, that's me. What's wrong with me? Why do I do that? That's where you need to break this cycle. So if anything that I just said resonated with you, I want you to bring awareness to that in the most loving way. Like, yes, I do that. Okay, I recognize that, and just keep it neutral. Because the first part to removing yourself from the cycle is being aware that you are in the cycle. So I want to give you 3 questions that I asked myself when I noticed that I was in this cycle and I was living my life without being authentic to myself, without living in my power, without living in my truth. And I really had to dive into, like, do I want to continue to live my life for other people, or do I want to start living for myself? And so 3 questions I asked were, how do I want to feel? So that's the first one. How do you want to feel? What does that look like? Sometimes we go through our whole life without even asking ourselves that question. What do we want to feel? How do we want to feel? Do we want to feel light and free? Do we want to feel loved and joyful? What does that look like for you? So that's the first thing. Let's anchor down in what are the feelings you want to feel. And when you do that, don't think about, oh, I don't know how I could get there. It's not about how you can get there. It's about, what do you want in your life? What do you actually want to feel in your life? And stop living on autopilot. How can we get into ourselves, tap into our own emotions, and start feeling the way we want to feel? Now, the second question is, once you know how you want to feel, is what in your life is moving you toward that feeling, and what and who are moving you away from that feeling? So think about situations, people, experiences, whatever you have going on in your life, what is moving you towards your desired feeling? And you can even journal about this, write it down, recognize this. And what and who are in your life are moving you away from that? What is constantly dragging you down? What is constantly depleting you? What is constantly putting you in a place where you come last? And write that down. The third one I want you to answer, and this can be really challenging, is, what does my life look like if nothing changes in 5 years? So in 5 years, what does your life look like if you continue down the same pattern, continue to do the same things that you've always done? What does that look like? And how do you feel 5 years down the road if nothing changed? And so when you go through this, you may not have the answers right away because these are pretty thick questions to answer. But what I want you to do is just recognize them. And you may notice that the answers come in the form of when you're taking a shower, all of a sudden you just have a thought like, oh yeah, that is taking me down all the time. Why do I put up with that? Or maybe you go for a walk and all of a sudden you get a lot of clarity around it. You may not get answers right when you want them, but by asking yourself the right questions, you start to cultivate an understanding of yourself. You start to move yourself in a better direction, and you start to create those neural connections that actually allow you to change the way you see the world and the way you see yourself. And so that's why it's so important to ask yourself the right questions. and give yourself some space to actually process that. So if you have even 5 minutes of just silence, even before bed or when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself that question. How do I want to feel? When's the last time you asked yourself that? Probably less frequently than you ask, how am I making that person feel? How does that person feel about what I did or said? And allow yourself to start to take it back in, take back your power, start to recognize how you want to feel. Because when you feel like you're whole, your whole life becomes more whole and things start to change and shift by your energy level. So I want you to take this moment and take this message and give yourself the permission to move yourself in a direction where you can start to feel the way you want to feel. And now the world will shift for you. So I hope this helps to give you some clarity and to move in a direction where you start honoring your needs and start taking care of yourself in a way that is compassionate and loving. And maybe move yourself away from making sure that everybody and everything is okay before yourself. Thank you for tuning in.